countries race to secure medical supplies as coronavirus cases continue to spike. Our Fox News correspondent Greg Palcott has more from London.
Global coronavirus cases have surpassed 1 million, and health officials expect that number to rapidly increase as testing becomes more widely available. The high number of cases is overwhelming healthcare systems, leaving a shortage of medical equipment and protective supplies. And it's leading to competition among countries for masks and face shields to protect those on the front lines.
Just do what you can to protect your health care staff, because we are no good when we're lying on the bed next to our patients.
The coronavirus death toll surpassed 30,000 in Europe's hardest hit countries, including Italy, France, and Spain. Those regions account for more than half of the world's virus-related deaths. Countries are converting places, including markets and ice skating rinks, into morgues as other facilities reach capacity. But recent numbers provide a glimmer of hope, with signs that the curve is flattening in some regions.
We know that this is much more than a health crisis. We're all aware of the profound social and economic consequences of the pandemic.
Meanwhile, countries not yet past their peak have increased social distancing measures. Swedish officials have faced criticism for keeping businesses open during the pandemic, even as cases spike. Hospitals in the area are racing to increase bed capacity if things get worse.
We're continuously pushing the boundaries here, and is there a roof? Obviously, but we haven't hit it yet.
The World Health Organization warns countries that quickly lifting the lockdown could further the spread. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.